Welcome to Pleasurology Island. I'm Free Thought Steve, your host here on Pleasurology Island, where our motto is, feeling good is the best revenge. Today my topic is radical orgasm expansion, because I think that's probably a topic that most people would be interested in. Radical orgasm expansion. Is it possible to expand our orgasms? And if so, how do we do it? Now, I'm an old hippie. I was alive and coming of age and learning about life during the psychedelic counterculture of the 1960s and 70s. And it was in 1972 that I began to learn pleasurology techniques from my counterculture milieu, my counterculture environment, which unfortunately today has pretty much vanished. And so those of you who are younger now may not have access to these pleasurology techniques that resulted in me learning to have cosmic oceanic orgasms. Cosmic oceanic orgasms are fully expanded orgasms. You can't expand an orgasm any farther than that, because that orgasm is taking up all of your consciousness while you're having that orgasm. There is no more consciousness left over for that orgasm to expand into. Now, I started doing pleasurology in 1972, and I had no idea that it would lead to the experience of the cosmic oceanic orgasm. And I want to share with you for free, gratis, out of the goodness of my heart, so that my life will have some meaning and purpose to it. I want to share with you all the pleasurology techniques that led me to being able to have cosmic oceanic orgasms. Now, this is entirely scientific. There is absolutely nothing mystical about this whatsoever. It's based on our bodies, and particularly on our brains and the nerve circuitry of our brains, which is where orgasms originate. Orgasms don't originate just in your sex organs. Orgasms really originate in your brain. And so the process of giving ourselves and giving our partners, or having cosmic oceanic orgasms while we're making love to a partner, or while we're just making love to ourselves, just giving ourselves the satisfaction of satisfying our natural sex drive in the easiest and most economical and tidiest way possible, by giving ourselves an orgasm that will completely satisfy our sex drive anytime we want, without having to wait for someone else to be willing to cooperate with us on that. That may take a long time, and we don't necessarily want to wait that long. But once we learn how to have cosmic oceanic orgasms that feel like they're filling the entire cosmos, you're like in an ocean of orgasmic joy and pleasure. Once we learn how to have them, that's a learned skill. It's a scientific skill at that point that we have learned how to do, and we can give ourselves a cosmic orgasm, a cosmic oceanic orgasm, every time that we give ourselves an orgasm. And when we're making love with a partner, every time we have an orgasm with the partner, we can have cosmic oceanic orgasms. So I learned how to have cosmic oceanic orgasms about 3 years after I started doing pleasurology. I didn't know pleasurology was going to lead me to that kind of an orgasm. I had a feeling that it might help expand my orgasms, but I was totally taken by surprise when I learned how to have an orgasm, a fully expanded orgasm, beyond which there is no further expansion possible. It took me 3 years after when I started pleasurology to when I learned how to have a cosmic orgasm. And now you may say, I don't want to wait 3 years to have a cosmic oceanic orgasm. You may not have to wait that long because you know where you're going. I didn't know where I was going. So I don't know, I could have started having them earlier, quite possibly, but I didn't know it was possible to do it. But now I'm informing you that it is possible to do it, and so that now you can know as you do the pleasurology techniques what you're aiming for and how it's going to help you. But the point is, even though it took me 3 years of pleasurology practice before I had a cosmic oceanic orgasm, since then, it's been another 53 years. I'm now 76 years old. It's been 50 years, because I was 23 when I started doing pleasurology. I was 26 when I learned how to have a cosmic oceanic orgasm. And I'm 76 now. So that's 50 years of cosmic oceanic orgasms, thousands and thousands of them, literally. So even though it took me 3 years to learn the skill, I've had 50 years and who knows, 10,000 cosmic orgasms? I don't know. Lots and lots of them. I probably spent more time in the state of sexual bliss and high arousal sexual bliss than anyone on the planet that I know of. I don't want to, go for a place in the Guinness Book of World Records or anything. I don't want to brag. I'm a very modest person. I'm a sincere person. You know that song, Guantanamera? One of my favorite lines from that is when the man who is singing the song to the woman says, Yo soy un hombre sincero. Yo soy un hombre sincero de donde crece la palma. I am an honest person. And I do happen to live where palm trees grow. But the important thing is that I'm an honest person. And I am telling you this because I would like to help you bring a little more pleasure into your life. And so I want to encourage you to do this. This has to be your decision. But what I'm saying is that I have experienced personally the effects of all the pleasurology techniques that I'm going to teach you. And quite honestly, even if I had not ever learned to have cosmic oceanic orgasms, even before that, the pleasurology techniques were making me feel so good emotionally, and they had helped me out in my personality, how to become a less stressed personality, a more relaxed personality, so that all of my relationships with other people were getting better, including my love relationships. Because I had started practicing pleasurology techniques, which are fundamentally relaxation techniques. They are targeted relaxation techniques. That is, each one of them is aimed at a specific type of tension or stress that most of us feel as human beings. There are like 6 different types, of stress that are going on inside us at all times, basically, at any given time. It's just a question of how much or how little for most of us, particularly if we've never done relaxation exercises. Now, relaxation is the key to pleasure, to expanded pleasure and expanded orgasms. Now, don't be afraid of relaxation. Don't be frightened of it. Yes, it means spending time with yourself instead of being distracted with something outside yourself. Almost all of us spend most of our time avoiding ourselves by looking at a screen of some sort, reading a book, or being engaged in some kind of activity, or even just talking compulsively with other people. Anything like that will take us out of ourselves. We can forget ourselves. And we like that because we don't like being aware of ourselves. We're frightened to be aware of ourselves because we have a feeling that we don't feel that good. And we're right. And so part of the deal with pleasurology is we make ourselves feel good so that we can then spend more and more time being comfortable, feeling ourselves, experiencing ourselves, enjoying ourselves from head to toe, enjoying how we feel inside emotionally and physically, enjoying our sexual experiences more because we've learned how to pay more attention to ourself, to our own body and our own consciousness. Now, cannabis is very helpful in pleasurology. Cannabis has been, I consider cannabis the pleasure medicine that helps us out with all of our pleasurology techniques. It makes them more effective if we use them correctly. And the pleasurology techniques help make our cannabis high much more enjoyable. Even if we're not having cosmic orgasms, and even if we're not engaged in sexual activity, just our non-sexual cannabis high, just our ordinary being in the world when we're high on cannabis, becomes much more pleasurable when we combine the use of cannabis with pleasurology techniques, which are primarily body-mind relaxation techniques. Excuse me. Thank you. Okay. There are several major traditions of pleasurology that come from Asia, particularly the yoga tradition from India and the Taoist tradition from China, which I believe, I believe that these traditions were originated, were developed, were invented when people began to use psychoactive cannabis, which was about 4,000 years ago. It was about 2000 BC, apparently in Western China somewhere, that psychoactive cannabis was deliberately bred for. People had been using cannabis for tens of thousands of years to make fiber, hemp, nets, clothing, so forth. But it wasn't until apparently about 2000 BC that these smart folks in Western China realized that cannabis had psychoactive properties, and they selectively bred the plants to create psychoactive cannabis. And I believe that probably it was after doing that, cannabis is a psychedelic. Now, what is a psychedelic? A psychedelic is a substance that helps us become more aware of our own consciousness, more aware of everything that's going on inside our consciousness, including all the sensations of our body, including our emotions. All of these things become more vivid to us on cannabis. And so it's my belief that these ancient traditions of pleasurology, which involve a lot of physical relaxation movements, breathing movements, releasing emotional stress, and calming the mind, quieting the mind, centering the mind, and clearing consciousness of thought and focusing attention right where we want it to be. All of these things became more important to people when they started getting high. They began to care more about the state of their consciousness. They began to notice more the state of their bodies, and they began to notice that, man, when I stretch out, I feel better. I feel better not just physically, but I feel better emotionally too, which is great. And then breathing exercises, when I do certain breathing exercises, that calms me down. And I like to be calmer because I get calmer when I get high on cannabis. I get calmer naturally. And then when I do this breathing along with it, and when I do these muscle stretching out exercises along with that, I start getting really emotionally a lot calmer. And then when I steady my attention by focusing on just one thing, instead of letting my attention dart around from place to place all the time, focus my attention, and then when I really look at what's around me, instead of seeing a fog of thoughts, when I can clear those thoughts away, I can really look at the world. I can really hear the things around me clearly and distinctly. And when I pay attention to my body, if I'm not lost in my head in thoughts, if I pay attention to my body, I can really feel where my muscles are tense and where they're relaxed, and where how I can stretch them out a little better and make myself feel better. I think that cannabis and all the pleasurology techniques went together. They co-evolved. Cannabis helped us evolve, and cannabis use spread very quickly from China to Central Asia, where there's a temple that they have found where people would come apparently for miles around to drink a mixture of cannabis and opium and ephedrine. A little bit of upper, and opium is a feeling of being nurtured and calmed and soothed, and cannabis just makes everything vivid and more relaxed. Cannabis has neurotransmitter receptor sites throughout the emotional brain. Now, the emotional brain is what creates the stress that we're trying to get rid of. Stress that manifests itself in the body and in our internal organs by, ulcers or high blood pressure and diabetes. All these things are controlled from the emotional brain. The emotional brain controls what's going on inside our body. So it's much healthier for us physically to be calm. And it's the emotional brain that needs to unwind and relax and calm down. And then when the emotional brain is calm, the rest of our whole organism gets calm. And that's very healthy for us. And cannabis can do that because it has receptor sites throughout the key spots of the emotional brain. Every place that you find a key center in the emotional brain. Okay, that's the back of the brain. This is the front of the brain. This is the brain from the side. If we take the two halves of the brain, the two cerebrum, we open them up, and the areas that I've colored yellow and red, those are, in fact, the emotional brain. And so all of those areas have a high concentration of cannabis, THC being the psychoactive chemical in cannabis. THC receptor sites are concentrated throughout the emotional brain. So cannabis has a natural relaxing effect on the emotional brain. It kind of energizes the emotional brain, so we feel a little more, we have a little more emotional feeling of various types, and it kind of loosens up the inhibitions in our emotional brain. And that's what we really want to do, is loosen up the inhibitions. The emotional brain's job is, excuse me, the emotional brain's job is to evaluate everything that's going on right at the moment, right now. The emotional brain takes in all that information and it compares it with past situations in our life to see, what does this situation compare to? Does this situation compare to a safe situation or a scary situation? If it's a safe situation, then I can relax. If it's a scary situation, then I should be anxious and be very alert and worried. That's what the emotional brain is doing all the time. And it's not just, am I safe or not? It's like, does something deserve a laugh? When something funny happens, it's our emotional brain that automatically recognizes that as funny, and it spontaneously emits a burst of energy, a burst of happy funniness energy into our system, and that burst of energy causes us to laugh. And the laugh is a reflex. It's not something we do voluntarily. A laugh has to be spontaneous. It has to be the emotional brain's spontaneous response to something funny in the environment. And the emotional brain is always looking for things that are funny or maybe sad. Like, I get very sad sometimes, like when I'm singing a song or something. And my emotional brain will be thinking about what the song is making me imagine. My emotional brain will be responding to what I'm imagining as I sing the song. And sometimes it makes me want to cry because I feel so full of love that I want to give to you wonderful human beings who are out there, the beautiful human beings of this planet, who are so unloved and who need love so much and who should be giving love to each other. We should all be giving each other more love. I'm a big love person. Love is an important part of pleasurology. Love is nurturing. Like when a mother holds her baby, the affection that the mother has for the baby, that is nurturing affection. And we never outgrow our need for that. We all need nurturing affection throughout our entire lives. And that's one of the things we need to do in pleasurology, is learn how to give each other nurturing affection. And my favorite way of doing that is with a sandwich hug, where you have two people on the outside, one person in the middle. And you hug for a while, for a long time, for a minute or more, and then you trade places so that everybody gets a chance to be in the middle. And a long sandwich hug, you feel like you're back in the womb. And that's what nurturing is about. Nurturing is feeling like I am safe and I am loved. Those two things. And those are our most basic need, to feel safe and to feel loved emotionally. And that's even more important than sexual pleasure. Sexual pleasure is wonderful too, but nurturing affection is even more important, because nurturing affection makes us feel loved and safe and makes us feel like it's good to be alive. And try a sandwich hug with two friends, and you'll see what I mean. If everybody's into it, you can't force somebody to do a sandwich hug and have them enjoy it. That's not the way pleasurology works. Pleasurology has to be everybody doing just what they want to do, what they would like to do. Nobody being forced into a sandwich hug that they don't want to be part of because they won't enjoy it. But anyway, these traditions from Asia work well with cannabis to relax the chronic stress that our organism is under all the time. And it's the combination of cannabis and body-mind relaxation techniques that prepare us for having cosmic oceanic orgasms. An orgasm is an emotional response. An orgasm is triggered in the brain. Laughter is an emotional response. Laughter is triggered in the brain. The emotional brain gets some stimulation, some humor stimulation, a joke that's told to us. We visualize what the joke is about in our brain, and our emotional brain reacts to that visualization of what's so funny by releasing a laugh reflex. Sex is kind of like that. Our emotional brain finds itself in a situation where it's getting sexual stimulation. It's getting stimulation that the sexual recognition center in the emotional brain recognizes as a sexy kind of stimulus. Seeing somebody who is attractive to us in doing something or posing in such a way that seems very sexually stimulating to us, that will trigger sexual arousal as the response from the emotional brain. The emotional brain has several levels of sexual response in sexual arousal. Initial arousal is what creates erection in the man, clitoral erection and vaginal lubrication in the woman. That's the initial level of arousal. And if the stimulation becomes more intense, and if we have physical stimulation that's added to the visual stimulation, or if someone is close to us and we're holding them, or if we're imagining something and we add imaginary stimulation and physical stimulation together, what we get is an increasing level of sexual arousal. The more that we have a combination of physical sexual pleasure and emotional arousal, the feeling that, oh yeah, this is really sexy, and being with this person, even if it's just in our imagination, is really sexy. And what we're doing, even if it's just in our imagination, is really sexy. The way we're interacting is really sexy to our emotional brain, to the sexiness recognition center that's in the nerve circuits of our emotional brain. That recognition center says, yes, this is really sexy what's going on. And at the same time, I'm getting all this wonderful sexual pleasure from my sex organs. The combination of the two comes into consciousness and creates increasing levels of bliss in consciousness. And at a certain point, the amount of bliss that is in consciousness hits a threshold level, and that's all the bliss that consciousness can absorb at this moment. And when that happens, the energy then rebounds downward into a slightly lower part of the brain. Here, it goes back down here. Up here, maybe we're experiencing the bliss. But then when it gets too much bliss, it bounces back down to a center right here in the brainstem, and that's the orgasm reflex trigger center. And so when that energy rebounds down there because the brain can't handle any more energy, then the orgasm reflex trigger center triggers an orgasm reflex. Just the way that a laugh is triggered by the emotional brain, an orgasm is triggered when the level of sexual stimulation becomes more than the brain can handle. So, to have orgasm expansion. Okay, all right, what happens then? Actually, when the orgasm reflex is triggered, what it does, it sends nerve impulses down the spine to the sex organs, to the muscles at the base of the sex organs, the orgasm muscles that contract, repeatedly contract. And in the male, they expel the semen from the penis, and in the female, they contract around the vagina, and she can feel that. And then what each of those muscle contractions, in turn, creates sensations that come from the sex organs back up the spinal cord into the brain and into consciousness. And those are the waves of orgasmic pleasure that are different from the sexual pleasure that went on before. The waves of orgasmic pleasure are created by the contraction of the muscles in the sex organs, and they come up to the brain, and they fill consciousness with orgasm. But the amount of consciousness, the space within consciousness, which is filled by those waves of orgasmic pleasure, may be narrow or it may be broad and expansive. And what we're working for in pleasurology is to create a more expansive flow of orgasm out into consciousness. And the reason relaxation is so important is that it is tension in the body and tension in the brain, and the brain being filled with consciousness, being filled with thoughts, a fog of thoughts. All of that reduces the amount of space that the orgasm can fill. And so we may get really narrow but intense orgasms rather than broad and intense orgasms. The more relaxed we are, the more powerful our orgasms are. Ultimately, what we want to do is this. We want to be so relaxed that as we become sexually aroused, our consciousness can absorb all of the sexual bliss energy, the arousal energy that our emotional brain is releasing, that is combining with the physical sensations from our sex organs. We've got basically two basic inputs to consciousness, two sexual inputs, the physical input and the arousal, the emotional arousal input. The physical input comes primarily from friction sensations, and if you're using a lubricant, which you should be, or if the vagina is moist or whatever, and providing enough lubrication, the more lubrication there is, the more pleasurable that surface friction feels. And that's the physical pleasure sensations. But combined with that, the emotional brain will be at a certain level of emotional arousal in terms of how sexy the emotional brain feels that the situation is. Is something really sexy happening? Is the person I'm imagining or actually being with really sexy to me? Am I imagining doing something really sexy with me and that person? Or whatever else it is that I'm imagining? How sexy does my emotional brain find that situation, whether it's real or imagined, or an entertainment video situation that I'm watching, for instance, or a book that I'm reading? How sexy does my emotional brain find it when I imagine, what I'm reading in that book? When I imagine that scene, for instance, how turned on do I get? So the emotional energy is how turned on I am. The physical pleasure is how nice, how delicious does the physical sensation coming from my sex organs feel. What happens is, when these two get to the brain and they mix, it's the emotional content that determines how pleasurable the physical sensations are going to feel. Let me say that again, because it's important to get this. It's the degree to which the emotional brain is turned on. The more the emotional brain is turned on, the more pleasurable the physical sensations will feel. They can be the identical physical sensations that we were feeling a few moments ago when we weren't quite so turned on, and they felt okay, they felt nice, but then suddenly when we get really turned on by something, all of a sudden the physical sensations intensify in the level of pleasure that they are. And so that combined emotional and physical input to consciousness releases a burst of sexual bliss energy. So that's why it's important for us to be aware of our own mental activity and our own emotional brain's activity while we're having sex, to be aware when our emotional brain is getting really turned on by what's happening. Because orgasms are different for men and women to some extent. Not always. Everybody's individually different, but in general, there are some differences between men and women, where men have a tendency to have an orgasm quickly at the first burst of a bliss energy that is released from the emotional brain. For women, that they may be able to absorb, women, you may be able to absorb more pleasure energy into consciousness without triggering the orgasm reflex. It may take longer and larger amounts of sexual energy bliss. So you may be trying to increase that level of sexual energy bliss as much as possible. And you would do that by focusing your mind on the sexiest things you can think about, sexiest thing that comes to your mind, whatever it happens to be, focusing on that and visualizing that as vividly as possible, or focusing on the actual situation, focusing on the sexiest part of that situation. And it's the emotional arousal that will increase the level of bliss that is generated by the physical sensations that you're feeling. For men, because most of us are trying to not have an orgasm too soon. What we want to do is be as relaxed as possible and be very aware of each time that our emotional brain releases a burst of arousal energy. Each time our emotional brain suddenly gets turned on by something, it'll release a burst of emotional arousal energy, and that will make the physical sensations we're feeling all of a sudden get really a lot more pleasurable, and our consciousness will fill up with pleasure. At that point, it's very important for a man to stop all physical stimulation completely at that point, and also to stop thinking about anything sexy, and to relax your eyes. I know that you don't ever think about my eyes are tense. No, your eyes are tense, but I will show you exercises to relax them. And that's a very key part of having cosmic orgasms, is having the eyes relaxed and having our mind free of thoughts. Because thoughts take up space in consciousness. Consciousness only has a finite amount of space. And the bliss energy needs to expand into that space. So you want to clear the thoughts out of that space instantly. Stop thinking that stuff and just focus on the bliss energy. Let it expand out as far as it can into consciousness, and make some noise at that point to help release some of the arousal energy through your voice. Moan, oh, oh, oh. Let it out, because the sound can help reduce the level of sexual bliss so that we don't trigger the orgasm reflex. But fundamentally, we have to be relaxed. We have to have practiced relaxation techniques for some time before we're capable of doing this in our brain. We have to practice clearing our thought stream out of our consciousness. That's something called Zen meditation. I like to do it by just listening to music, because when you're focusing your attention completely on a piece of music and on the melody that's being played, when you're focusing on the music, you're not thinking about stuff. If you're hearing the music perfectly clearly, you're not talking to yourself in your head. And similarly, we can practice just looking at something outside us and paying full attention to something still but beautiful. It could be a picture of something, a plant or flowers or something, and just paying attention to it. It can be just a dot on a piece of paper. But what we do is we practice paying attention to it and not having a fog of thought images in front of our eyes. And we see how long we can do that. And those two things are good practice for then when we're having sex and we feel a sudden burst of bliss energy, and we've been thinking about something sexy, we know how to stop that thought. We know how to clear that thought out of our head in a fraction of a second. It's gone. And all we're doing is totally relaxing, breathing deeply, making some noise, and letting that bliss energy dissipate. The more relaxed we are, the more energy we can absorb without triggering the orgasm reflex. So that's why relaxation is the key to having cosmic oceanic orgasms. So that's all I want to say for today, because I think that's a lot of material. I'll go over it again, but I just wanted to give you an overall feel for the kind of thing that I will be teaching you. I don't think you'll find a pleasurology program anywhere that's as complete as what I'm going to be teaching you. And so I think that you have your best success of learning how to have cosmic oceanic orgasms by following the suggestions that I make as diligently, with as much dedication as possible. That's if you want to have more powerful orgasms, which I hope you do. So anyway, in the meantime, may all your trails be happy, and may all your orgasms be fully expanded. Talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.